Mr. Chairman, the scenario of today's meeting is absolutely clear and predictable. It, like previous similar initiatives of our Western, and more recently European, colleagues, is not being convened to solve problems and bring the Ukrainian crisis closer to a peaceful solution. The goal of this meeting is to prevent the image of a supposedly free and democratic Ukraine, a victim of the so-called Russian aggression, from completely deflating, which the European sponsors of the Kiev regime have been trying to keep afloat for several years now, having begun to form it long before the start of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. It is becoming increasingly difficult for London, Paris, Berlin, and their satellites to inflate this propaganda bubble, the dictatorship that has been established in Kiev and the desire of the expired little Prince of Kiev to hold on to power at any cost, which he will lose with the advent of peace, are too obvious. His main fear is the elections, in which he and his henchmen will have to answer for not fulfilling promises about peace with Russia, about protecting the rights of Russian-speaking Ukrainians, about respect for the rights and freedoms of every person in the country, which he has turned into a concentration camp and a meat grinder. In addition, as long as there is a fear of the Russian threat, Zelensky's gang does not have to account for the stolen budget money in Western, primarily American, aid, which already amounts to tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars. His accomplices from Europe and the Biden administration, who have also made a lot of money on the Ukrainian conflict, do not want this either. Therefore, the main task of this bunch of militarists is to prevent the main shareholder, the United States, from leaving the Ukraine anti-Russia geopolitical project and prolonging the war as long as possible. This is not easy, since the new American administration has opened its eyes over the past few months to the true face of the Zelensky regime and the root causes of the Ukrainian conflict. Therefore, any provocations, any lies regarding Russia, regarding its actions and plans are used. And today in this hall we are asked to believe that Russia is deliberately shelling residential areas of Ukrainian cities, presenting as evidence the consequences of the work of Ukrainian air defense systems, deployed next to residential buildings and social facilities in violation of the basic norms of international humanitarian law. At the same time, they keep silent about the fact that the targets of our strikes are exclusively objects related to the military-industrial complex of Ukraine, which we successfully destroy and disable. In the last few days alone, we have hit ammunition and military technical equipment depots in the Dnipropetrovsk region, a temporary deployment point, and a missile and artillery weapons depot of a mechanized brigade of the Ukrainian army in the Sumy region, as well as a temporary deployment point of foreign mercenaries in the area of the settlement of Svyatogorsk in the Donetsk People's Republic and in the Kharkov region. A strike was carried out on a Ukrainian defense industry enterprise, the Pavlograd chemical plant in the Dnipropetrovsk region. 2 Patriot anti-aircraft missile launchers were destroyed. A group missile attack was carried out on an unloading site and a warehouse with military equipment and ammunition in the port of Odessa. This attack resulted in the destruction of about 100 containers, which contained important components for unmanned boats, unmanned aerial vehicles, and ammunition. In addition, it is being hushed up that Russia is carrying out these actions as a retaliatory measure in connection with the massive and targeted shelling of peaceful Russian cities by the Kiev regime. Thus, despite the 72-hour ceasefire declared by Russia on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the victory over fascism, more than 14,000 violations were recorded from May 8th to 11th. Over 4,000 shellings from barrel artillery, tanks and mortars, 62 shellings using MLRS, 9,900 strikes and drops of ammunition from drones. 5 attempts by Ukrainians to break through the Russian state border in the Belgorod and Kursk regions. 37 attacks by the Ukrainian army were recorded. During these 3 days of aggression, 6 peaceful Russians were killed by Banderites. At least 17 people were injured. It is symptomatic that the Kiev regime unleashed the most massive drone attacks on civilian targets in a number of Russian cities remote from the front line, including Moscow, after the beginning of progress on the peace track. Namely, after the resumption of direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Istanbul set the benchmarks for agreements on ending the conflict. From 8 p.m. May 20th to 8 a.m. May 27th, 2,331 attack unmanned aerial vehicles launched from Ukraine were destroyed and intercepted, including 1,465 attack drones outside the Special Military Operations Zone. Unfortunately, as a result, there are civilian casualties and deaths, including women and children. On May 22nd, as a result of an attack on the village of Panteliimonovka in the Donetsk People's Republic, 8 people were wounded. On the same day, in the Vasilievsky municipal district of the Zaporizhia region, a girl born in 1990 was killed and 4 children were injured as a result of drone strikes. Ukraine also launched 2 HIMARS missile strikes on civilian targets in the city of Lvov in the Kursk region, where 16 people were injured, including 2 children. Mr. Chairman, the plans of Zelensky and his accomplices are, as they say, visible to the naked eye. Their goal is to deceive and disorient the American President Trump, who is taking decisive steps towards peace, and to try at any cost to return his country, which has already wasted hundreds of billions of dollars on aid to Ukraine, to anti-Russian and Russophobic positions. We will analyze in detail their methods and tactics to undermine the peace efforts of the leaders of Russia, the United States, and a number of other regional mediators at tomorrow's meeting, which we deliberately requested precisely on this topic, so we will not dwell on this now. I will only say that it is becoming increasingly difficult to promote Ukrainian and Western lies about Russia, since the real actions of the Kiev regime, its conscious choice in favor of war and further suffering of its citizens speak louder than any words. The peace initiatives and specific steps of the Russian leadership are also absolutely clear and obvious. We intend to continue to act in this way, and we are determined to continue the serious direct negotiation process with Ukraine, which had interrupted in April 2022 at the instigation of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Russophobic associates. The result of the negotiations should be a solution that would reliably eliminate the root causes of the Ukrainian conflict and the threats to the security of our country emanating from Ukraine. We propose to the Ukrainian side to meet in Istanbul on June 2nd and discuss the content of our memoranda and approaches to the negotiation process. As long as Kiev tries to prolong the war and provoke Russia by striking residential and civilian infrastructure on our territory, we will continue our special military operation and destroy objects associated with the military potential of the Kiev regime. And no new anti-Russian sanctions, arms supplies to Ukraine, or other hostile steps towards Russia will prevent the inevitable military defeat of the Zelensky regime. The choice is now up to Ukraine.
What the world needs now is not louder voices of blame, but clearer calls for peace. We have heard the accusations, the justifications, and the denials. But behind every statistic cited today lies a human life, a family torn apart, a child silenced by war, a future halted by violence. The choice before us is not one of narrative, but of action. Do we choose endless confrontation? Or do we have the courage to forge a path to dialogue, honest, painful, but necessary? Let it be clear, peace is not weakness. Restraint is not surrender. And truth is not propaganda. The people of Ukraine and the people of Russia deserve more than endless war. They deserve leaders bold enough to end it. We urge all parties to return to the table, not for posturing, but for solutions. The world is watching. History will remember who fought for peace and who fought to prolong suffering. Thank you.